All right. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you may be. Thank you for joining us. Another episode of Catching Up with Jacob. And he is on the West Coast now. He is not too far from my house, although we're not in the same building. Jacob Prasch, welcome to Communist California. How are you?
I'm doing well in Jesus, and I'm certainly glad he's coming.
Amen. Amen. Well, not too far from where Jacob is, David Lister. David, welcome to Communist California. How are you?
I'm okay. I've had a wonderful time. I spent 4 hours witnessing to people at Klatch Coffee yesterday, and I'm looking forward to seeing all of our beautiful supporters at your church on Saturday.
Yeah, amen. Well, you guys are so close, and it'd be a lot of fun. Too bad we couldn't do it live today, but nonetheless, you're not too far. And then not too far from me either. It's Jay in the control rooms. How are you doing, Jay?
Very well, Marco. Welcome, my brothers, my comrades, to Communist California.
Yes, Jay and I suffer tremendously. Well, he used to be here. Now he's not here. He from California, but now he lives in Arizona, and he is part of our podcast schedule. Ken's Corner. Here it is. Ken, how are you, brother?
How you doing, Marco? Good to see you. Good to see all of you.
Yeah, good to have you on, brother. It's good to have you on. And so we got a great episode for everyone who's watching. And then from down under, Davey. How you doing, Davey?
Yeah, doing pretty good, thanks.
All right. God bless you, brother. Thank you. And Jay and Davey control the back areas and control the control rooms and make it possible for us to be here. So praise the Lord. Just a few announcements before we get started. Welcome those who are watching live and those who are watching later. This episode will go on not only on our video platforms, but it'll also be on podcasts. So let's start with the podcast real quick. Jay, what do we look like on podcasts this week? Do you have it before you?
I do. So as you know, we're on Podchasers, Pocket Cast, Deezer. This week we have the Weekend Bible Study with Jacob Prasch on 520. When Death Itself Becomes a Hiding Place. Pastor Tim Leach. 521, we have Sunday Morning with Pastor Marco, the Book of Colossians. Union with Christ, Part 1, 522. We'll have this episode of Catching Up with Jacob available. On 523, we have Evangelizing with David Lister, Evangelism Workshop, Session 3. 524, we'll have the current episode of Ken's Corner, episode 11. And 525, we have Jacob Prasch's midweek Bible study, Hebrews 12, part 2. 526, we have Jacob Prasch and the Seven Churches of Revelations, part 4. And then finally, 527, we have the weekend Bible study with Jacob Prasch, When the Lamp is Flickering. And then we'll get into 528 next week.
Doesn't awesome. That guy ever get a day off?
Nope.
We've been trying to get him a day off. It's wonderful to have the podcast, and it's been listened to. A wide range of people listen to it from different platforms, and we've had some new episodes, and one of those is Ken's Corner. Ken, let the viewers know. They know where to find it now that Jay told them. But what is Ken's Corner about, and what is it that you cover when we talk about it in Ken's Corner?
So Jay and I, we break down the news, and we add a biblical aspect to it, which you have a lot of people that are breaking down the news, but you don't have a biblical view of the news. So we always add in each story a biblical view of what relevant to the last days and all that, and which I truly believe we are living in. And it's growing. I heard the other day how many people are listening. So that's awesome. Glad to be here.
And Ken, people don't know that, but you have a great deal of experience in terms of not only the NAR and what they're all about, but also out of the Word of Faith movement. You got a tremendous testimony in terms of what God has done in your life, and they can find that a lot of it in Ken's Corner. But with the NAR stuff, you're quite astute. As good as our brother in Israel is astute at what's going on with Tikkun there. You have a pretty good handle here on the NAR.
Well, God started opening me up to it with the Word of Faith. Obviously, when I worked with Benny Hinn for 4 years. I was his right-hand man, and I just backed off and started noticing things. And then when the NAR got really strong, it was kind of semi-starting, But when it got really strong, then I started following it quite, for the last 10 years. So yeah, I've been keeping up on it. It's part of the end times. It's part of last days. It is. And with it being involved with Trump, I mean, it was like most of the people that were up there with him spiritually were NAR people. It's crazy.
It's crazy. I mean, most
Yep.
people didn't notice the influence on the 2016, and then throughout those 4 years, the influence of the NAR on the election, and then what happened in 2020. And I think this is the point: is what will happen in 2024 is where we project the NAR is going to be a big part of that.
Yes, absolutely. So it's good to follow right now and good to get on board. Yep.
So get on Ken's Corner, figure out what the NAR is going to be doing in the election. And by all means, it's going to be an election with many different angles and many different things. And by God's grace, we'll be here to talk about what's going on, because it's very spiritually important to know the NAR movement, especially involved in the right-wing politics. And Jacob's been warning about pastors and Christian leaders who are good. They know the gospel, but they get involved politically with NAR. They get involved politically with the elections, and they get politically involved, and that comes with a lot of sticky stuff, including the NAR.
Yes.
Absolutely. Well, Jacob, you're going to be here with us tomorrow here in Devore, and
Amen.
your listeners going to be here, and we're going to talk about gospel and prophecy, getting out of Babylon. And you're talking about the kings of Judah. You're going to be talking about what happened in the last days of Judah and Babylon and Egypt and the palm of God. And also we're going to be talking about Jesus, the foundation, on Sunday. So not only Saturday, but on Sunday. There's so many people that have told us they're coming, but not only that, they're traveling here to spend the weekend with us. So that would be a lot of fun. You've been traveling on the East Coast. Now you get to come to the West Coast.
I'd also advise people to visit the Moriel website. I'll be speaking at the Church of the Open Door, the Moriel affiliated church in New York City, in Manhattan, with Pastor Dave Rosetto and with Jerry DiMatteo in Baltimore on the 28th. So the 27th, I'll be speaking in Manhattan, and the 28th, I will be speaking in Baltimore. My father's family came to Baltimore from Germany and then to New York, and I'll be two hometowns, 27th and on the 28th. So if you are available and would like to come see us, we'd be more than happy to have your presence grace us. But also, we have a conference coming up in Scotland on the 16th and 17th of June. There may be some more announcements concerning that coming up, but right now the conference is going ahead, 16th and 17th of June. The conference is filled up, but they've given us more rooms, more bedrooms in an adjacent facility across the parking lot. So although we filled up the main building where the conference is, there's another building where they've given us some extra rooms. So although we ran out of space, we still have some space left. Be that as it may, I'm looking forward to being in Devore with Pastor Marco and other friends tomorrow.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be a lot. Plus, they're going to feed us tomorrow, Jacob. So that's a big deal.
Oh yeah, comida.
Yeah, comida para los muchachos. Yeah, we're going to have some food there. So if you do come, not only would you be fed spiritually and primarily, but you also have some lunch. We'll spend some time. How about a lunch with Jacob Prash? Where can you get that? I mean, that might be worth a lot of money. Lunch with Jacob Prash. There we go.
Jacobo.
Comer con Jacobo. Amen. And then David, you're going to be speaking on some discipleship and preaching the gospel, and you got a chance to do that yesterday, so that was wonderful.
Tuning up before the show.
All right, gentlemen, let's catch up. And let's talk about something that we mentioned last week. It is increasing. We've seen the tip of the iceberg, as it were, right now. But we've also didn't talk about the other issue, which is the northern border. The northern border is also an issue. We talked about the southern border last week and what a chaos that is. And I'm sure, one political party, as it were here in the States, wants chaos at the border. That's what a lot of people have been saying. But what about the northern border? Jacob, we watched a quick video before we got on here and what's going on in the northern border. And most people focus on the south and the southern border, and that's an important part too, coming from the Darien Gap in Panama and traveling all the way here in Latin America, all the way to the U.S. But what about the northern border? Can you talk a little bit about that before we dive in further?
I first began warning about the Canadian borders problem with the United States after September 11th attacks. That's when I first warned about it. Way back when, more than 20 years ago, I warned about it because of the high immigration into Canada of Muslims. We've seen that the normal type civil unrest behavior associated with Islam that you see in England, Paris, and other countries, other cities where they've allowed high Islamic immigration, and Canada is saturated with many Muslims. In their immigration policy, they have not screened or had any impetus to even see the problem with radical Islam in Canada, but it is certainly a problem. And with a semi-open border, very permeable border between Canada and the United States, most of the border between Alaska and Canada is unguarded. If somebody can bear the cold, they can simply cross into Alaska and make their way without any customs clearance into the lower 48 if they wish to. It's quite dangerous. There is an Islamic population in Canada. I'm not saying all Muslims are terrorists. Half are pro-radical, half are not. Probably it's a 50-50 split, or maybe a 60-40 split in favor of those who are pro-jihad. But that's not to say that they're all terrorists. Some are, some aren't, some are pro-terrorists, some are not. But you have no way of telling one from another. The other problem is Tawhid, the Islamic doctrine of Tawhid. They're allowed to lie. It's military disinformation to them to say that Islam is a religion of peace and we want peace, when in fact they're planning jihad, because to them it's permissible lying. Their religion allows them to lie because they see it as military disinformation. Now, again, the radical Islamic community in Canada is a lot bigger than the Canadian government or the American government wishes to admit. It is a national security risk, as well as the other problems. A considerable amount of drugs have always come through Canada into the United States. Not like Mexico, but a considerable matter. It's not negligible. Organized crime, the Italian mafia regularly brought people from Italy and Sicily into New York over the Canadian border. If you read the annals of the mafia in America, it's always been an easy border to cross. And it remains one. Given the left-wing policies of the Trudeau government, that amplifies the danger of the Canadian border. Canada is not the Canada of 12, 15 years ago. No. It is a very, very different country. For all intent and purposes, it can no longer be considered a democracy, although the United States can't either. Canada is even further. Canada and Australia have even gone further down the road away from democracy than the US has. It's not a democratic country anymore. The government is quite inimical to the traditional values that many Canadians would have had. And there's no real political opposition in Canada. There's no right-wing or conservative opposition. Since Mr. Harper, there hasn't been a decent government or a decent political voice or anyone that's going to uphold traditional Canadian values. It's pretty much gone. And it is a threat, but don't expect the present administration to do anything about it.
David Lister, the Custom Border Protection data shows double up. It doubled up in 7 months, has more than double the encounters with illegal aliens coming through the northern border. There've been several, as Jacob talked about, people on the FBI watch list. They've been confirmed, people from Afghanistan, people from different terrorist nations that support terrorism have been crossing through not only the southern border, but the northern border as well. What do you make of this, and why? I mean, knowing that it's full throttle, anyone is not doing anything about it. No one seems to know what to do, but especially the opposition party here in the States.
Well, they actually know what to do. Put the wall up and enforce the laws and make contracts with Remain in Mexico policies, the policies of Mr. Trump. it just almost cut off the border. But they have no political will to do it because the end destruction of this is basically the end of the game is basically flooding America with a new people that they can rule over. That it's going to be a fiefdom. It's going to be just a feudum run by socialists and communists. That's the end game, and that's why nothing's going on here. The Democrats want this. This is their goal.
Ken, we have talked about probably voluminously about the southern border, not so much about the northern border, but it seems to be the same story, just geographically removed. What's your take on it? You got a good pulse on what's going on, especially being in Arizona. We hear a lot of that here in Southern California. We hear a lot of that as well. But what's the pulse there that you see?
Well, we have Yuma as our entry point, right? And you're seeing the northern border. That's New York, Vermont, New Hampshire up there. It's up tenfold up there, but it's up. They say 10,000 daily down. Our southern border. And one thing I'm looking at is tuberculosis and other things that are crossing over. It's a weaponized migration. That's what it is. That's what they've been calling it.
I know people don't want to say it's the replacement theory or anything like that, but in a lot of ways, it's not replacementism, but it's getting new voterism. Jacob, you talked about that before. A whole new pool of voterism.
Yes, that's absolutely correct. It's quite curious what's happening now. There are some left-wing Black American spokespeople, activists, realizing the implications of illegal immigration of primarily Hispanics into the United States, where you have Americans, a disproportionately large number of them Black people, living on the streets while illegal immigrants are being put into hotels at taxpayer expense. They also realize that it's going to change the electoral demographic away from Blacks. Now, they're smart enough to know, the establishment is smart enough to know that within 1 to 2 generations, you're going to have a visible upward mobility of Hispanics. While the average Black American family's income is only $35,000 a year, the average Hispanic is 8,000 higher, and that's the average. But if you take into account 2nd and 3rd generation Latinos, Hispanic American citizens, they're the same as the gringos. And there's an increasing number of them who are conservative voters, some Republican, some maybe independent, but certainly not liberal Democrats. This, in some places, reaches 50% of Latinos. So you need more and more Latinos because as they assimilate and Americanize within 1 to 2 generations, you begin losing a lot of them electorally. They become, they will not vote with the left. They know that. So what they have to do is just keep a contingent of Blacks on the side, just in case we need them in an election to throw certain purple states or to keep certain blue states blue. That's what it is. Now, some Blacks are beginning to realize this and say, wait a minute, Latinos are more upwardly mobile than us. Now they're going to be they are the number 2 minority, and they're going to be the number 2 voting minority. And they don't talk about it much, but you first saw it with the Trayvon Martin thing.
Yes.
More and more Black people are realizing that Hispanics are not distinguishably different than Caucasians. They're culturally the same. I mean, as Caucasians, they're beginning to see it. And they're beginning to see Hispanics, certainly 2nd and 3rd generation Hispanics, as being the same as Caucasians. So it's interesting to see the reaction among some left-wing Black leaders who realize what's happening, who realize that they're being replaced. They're just going to be kept as a lapdog for when they're needed by the powers that be. As Malcolm X said, and sometimes I agreed with him, sometimes I didn't, but as Malcolm X said, and as David Lister points out, The worst thing that could ever happen to Black Americans is white liberals.
Mm.
And now they're finding out. Now
Mm.
they're finding out.
Jay, you wanted to chime in on this.
I do. You know, if you really want to understand where we are with the borders, you have to really listen to what Joe Biden and Mayorkas are saying. They're saying the biggest threat that America faces is domestic terrorism. So understand this. They will do background checks. They will investigate any American citizen for any small infraction. But as far as trying to find out who is coming across the border, trying to do a background check on them, they get a free pass. So that shows you where they're focusing on. They're focusing on their citizens to keep them basically in check, because they know that it's a tinderbox right now.
You know, absolutely. I mean, I think he made that speech at Howard University this week. I think it was Monday, where he talked into a whole class. It's supposed to be a commencement speech, and he made it into this radical, political statement that the biggest problem are basically white nationalism. Basically, I think he
White
said
supremacy.
Yeah, he said white supremacy, but I'm sure he meant white nationalism. And so again, some people didn't like it. In fact, there were some black students who tried to appeal to the staff to say, "Hey, why'd you bring this guy here?" But it is looking more and more. The division have been sown, and it's looking more and more like we're heading toward a place that's not going to be very good. In fact, even Eric Adams, the mayor of New York City, we'll talk about him a little bit later, but he wants to revoke the New York City being a sanctuary state, the New York State, city as a sanctuary city. He doesn't want the migrant influx. But, David, they've been voting for this for a while. Now, all of a sudden, they don't want it. When they see the problem, as Jacob pointed it out, they don't want this.
That's right.
Yeah, it's crazy. But I think this is all being not covered up, but there is a sense of other things not being brought to the limelight because other news that are happening. And I think one of the biggest news, and it was, I guess some liberal organizations were saying it was a nothing burger, the Durham report. So the liberals said it was a nothing burger. The Durham report is out. It's a nothing burger, they said, because what the end result of the Durham report is, Trump is not a Russian agent. Jacob, we'll start with you. The collusion plot and everything that they said, it was nothing. It was a complete fabrication. What we do know, though, is that there are several leaders, including the FBI and the CIA, but from Obama to Biden to Loretta Lynch to Hillary Clinton, all knew this was a hoax, all knew this was a lie, and they allowed it to go against a elected president. This is huge. I mean, we're not talking about some small report. It took some time to put together, plus a lot of millions of dollars to be put together. But what do you make of the Durham report? I read most of it, or at least a big part of it.
Okay,
but
first of all, what
it's
the
pretty
Durham
crazy.
report does is simply, to my mind, confirms what the Mueller investigation established. That's all. You have a corrupt FBI, the Federal Bureau of Intimidation, or the filthy Bureau of Intimidation, something that needs to be abolished. It's not a national security agency. It's not a legitimate law enforcement agency or an investigation agency. It is a political police force, a Gestapo. The FBI, knowing that it was a forged dossier, paid for by the Clinton campaign, went and got a FISA warrant. And you had the lying hags on The View, those ridiculous women that lie all the time. You had the left-wing media and Rachel Maddow and Chuck Todd and all the usual chorus line of professional liars, the voice of the swamp, what the Russians call TASS and Izvestia and Pravda, we call the Washington Compost, the CNN, the mainstream media, etc., and the New York Slimes. Same thing. They continued to report this as if it was a fact. Now, Mueller said it wasn't. The only thing that the Durham report has shown is what Alan Dershowitz said. there is significantly more reason to have indicted Hillary Clinton than
That's
Donald
right.
Trump if she
That's
wasn't indicted. Or why was Podesta and Trump, why were they not, and Clinton not indicted? Why not? And now we find it involves Barack Obama, Coretta Lynch,
Yeah.
who was a corrupt, she met with Bill Clinton when his wife was under investigation.
Yeah. On the tarmac. Yeah.
Yeah.
The plane. Yeah.
You know, she's a corrupt woman. She should have been indicted. And obviously the usual cast of liars, like John, what's his name, from the CIA,
Oh, James Comey.
I'm Brennan.
James-
not Comey, John
Oh,
Brennan.
John Brennan.
Yeah. John Brennan.
Brittany.
These people were
James
all
Brennan.
in on it. They were all in on it. But don't expect any indictments. Don't expect a single indictment. There's no justice. There's no democracy. There's no fair media coverage from the mainstream media. Fox is now, of course, compromised. Don't expect anything. They're not going to indict Clinton. They're not going to indict Podesta. They're not going to indict John Benham. They're not going to indict King. They're certainly not going to go after Barack Obama. Instead, they will bring a fabricated indictment against Donald Trump, who, by the way, I personally do not support to be president again. But he should certainly not be under any kind of indictment by Bragg, a man who lets criminals go free to other felonies, even murder, with a manufactured charge against Trump. Where does it say that even if it was hush money, you are obligated to report it to the public if it is part of a settlement? It's just a ridiculous charge that's just invented. And meanwhile, he's letting murderers go. This is how corrupt and ridiculous it is. But nations get the leaders they deserve, and states get the leaders they deserve. Anybody who votes Democrat in San Francisco or Chicago or New York who gets murdered, you're only getting what you voted for. Don't whinge when they're sticking the knife in your throat. That's what you voted for. I think it's terrible, but it's what you voted for. It's poetic justice. That's what these people voted for, their own destruction, and that's what they're getting in these states.
I mean, they're literally willing to tear the country apart just to go after one man. Ken, what do you think of the Durham report? I mean, pretty indicting. I mean, they might as well call it Obamagate because he is at the very center of this.
Exactly. That's what I was thinking. And that's exactly who's, remember, every time I see Biden, people, say stuff about Biden, I think of Obama when he said, I look for the earphone in my ear and I'm speaking and the president will be reacting. And I just look at everything that goes back to when he was involved with the 216, just the whole thing. So it's really nuts. I mean, we live in times where you can't, and it's one thing after another. It's one thing after another. It's crazy.
Yes, one crisis after another.
One crisis after another. Yep.
Hey, David, is that why people don't react to it anymore? I mean, they just get slammed by one wave after another. It just seems like they're overwhelmed and people just want to be left alone. Most people don't even care, don't even know what the Durham report is. And it's one of the biggest things that we can possibly see in our nation of the corruption that goes deep into the FBI, CIA, obviously the president, Obama, and all the stuff that they were doing.
Yeah. I remember when Biden got elected, my father and I talked about the Durham report and Mr. Durham. And I told him then, I said, no one's going to jail for this. It goes back to the Democrats' first example of ruling, and that's Andrew Jackson from the state of Tennessee. He had a Republican Congress, a Republican Senate, and they would pass rules and they could even override his veto. But he said, let's see them enforce the laws. And the Democratic Party is lawless and they're just doing whatever they want to create their goals. It's not anything lawful, and they don't care. They're just killing and destroying this country. And like you've said many times, Marco, it's dividing us. There is a dividing line coming. We're seeing it from the north and the south, and from the liberals to the conservatives, and states are having laws in one place that are diametrically opposite in liberal states. And so I believe these are their policies, is to just bring about the downfall of a republic. Benjamin Franklin asked early on what he was asked, what did we have when the government? And he said, we've given you a constitutional republic if you can hold on to it. Democracy means mob rule. It's kind of what you're seeing right now. They're doing what they want to do, mob rule, and they don't take and protect the minorities. And the blacks are seeing this in Chicago, saying, oh, these guys are going to put in non-citizens to vote, and they're going to take away our power. This is what those people were in an area. I used to run a food program down there. And now you can't even go down there. People hide. So it's a terrible, terrible thing to see what's happening. And like I said last week, I've given up hope. I'm looking for Jesus to come, man. It's the only solution. The government is. I don't mean to be such a downer, but but I'm looking for the government to be on his shoulders. So that's what I'm looking for, because I don't know what can turn it around. Now, if we were to get a decent president and maybe at least keep one of the House or the Senate, we could at least maybe get another respite for a few years. But without the presidency, it'll just be more of the same.
More chaos.
The U.S. taxpayers spent $6.5 million on the Durham report, and it is an exercise in futility. There's going to be nothing coming from that investigation. So just let's comprehend that. We spent $6.5 million so that we could know what we already knew.
Yeah.
Yep.
Adam Schiff from this state said he had proof. He had talked to people. He had unbelievable proof. He said that Trump was a Russian agent. He had proof. He couldn't say it because it was under investigation, but he had the proof. Comes to nothing. I mean, this guy should be in prison. I mean, it's sedition. He lied, and it's sedition. And all these people are committed sedition against the same president.
Stupid enough to vote for him. There will be people who will be stupid enough to vote for a proven liar. They get what they deserve. This crime, this murder that's happening in these cities, it's terrible, but it's reaping the fruit of their own actions.
I mean, they're not going to jail, but you got this guy in Florida. He goes under the name Ricky Vaughn, who made a meme about election, and he's facing 10 years for making a meme, just making fun of the way the elections are, just posting it that, hey, this is kind of how it works. And I think everyone, probably here of us, have joked about the fact that, some of the stuff that happens in elections is pretty funny. But he made a meme about it. He's facing 10 years. 10 years for a meme, and yet Adam Schiff, I think that Jay told me he's running for senator now. So, what a world!
California.
Yeah,
and he'll get in.
World. He might, he might just get in. Ken, what a crazy world! You make a meme, and I know you're familiar with memes.
I'm familiar with memes. I'm known as the meme lord on Twitter. Well, not anymore. I got kicked off of Twitter, the first one, for making a President Trump meme, and that just shows you. Yeah. So for the 2020 election, I was just, doing and it was just a funny meme, and then it offended everybody, and I got kicked off. So I kind of experienced that with the Twitter. I'm not experiencing. Nobody's showed up to my door yet. I'm looking right now. I don't see anybody at my door. So I'm hoping, but that's crazy. 10 years. That's crazy.
I mean,
when the FBI, Marco, is obstructing Congress.
Yeah.
The FBI is literally obstructing Congress, where Clinton is not going to be indicted despite the Durham report, nor Podesta, nor Brennan, nor certainly not Obama. None of them are even going to be indicted. But some guy is looking down the possibility of 10 years for putting up a meme that the Democratic Party doesn't like.
Yeah.
Stalinism. And this Garland, I mean, you know, I understand why God created hell when I look at the person of Merrick Garland.
Yes.
I think there's
Yeah.
one verse in the Bible I'd correct. You know, Jesus said hell was a place made for Satan and his angels. I think we need to check the manuscripts. There must be one somewhere that says "and Merrick Garland."
So no consequences, right? But I've been talking about the Civil War, and every time I talk about it, I just need to clarify. I don't mean the muskets and the North and the South.
Right.
I mean what we already have in place, that division that David Lister. David, we'll start with you. Marjorie Taylor Greene introduces articles of impeachment, not only against Biden, but against Mayorkas and Garland and Wray. But does that mean anything anymore? Or I mean, are we going to have any kind of resolution, or are we just going to have a more fractured balkanization of certain states against the federal government?
I think it's more like what you're saying, a balkanization, because the bar for impeachment is so high. You need 2/3 of the Senate to convict. And unless you're like a Richard Nixon, where everybody saw the crimes, that they would have got rid of him, but he got out before. So it's a futility. It's a waste of time to think that you can remove Majorca, Biden, Kamala, the whole gang, because the Democrats are much smarter about sticking together than Republicans are.
Yes.
And so they will stick together to stay in power. And so it's a waste of time.
Even if they got an indictment in the House, even if they got an indictment,
Yep.
thanks to the incompetent, failed post-presidential political leadership of Donald Trump and Mitch McConnell, of course, the Republicans did not retake the Senate. Even if they retook the Senate, they would have needed 66 or 67 seats to remove Biden. The only way it could happen is if, again, going back to Watergate, when there was so much media hatred against Nixon anyway, and so everybody knew what he was and how corrupt he was and what a liar he was, that people of his own party were willing to vote against him to save their own political career. If I don't
Yes.
go against Nixon, I'll lose the election myself. My own constituency will vote against me unless I go against Nixon. So, I mean, there was Barry Goldwater and those guys, and Gerald Ford told Nixon to resign, and he did, because his own party would have turned against him if it went to the Senate. That's the only way that a Democrat would vote to impeach a Democrat president, is if it might cost them their own seat in the Senate. That's the only way, because that's what they care about.
Now, one of the things the government has been very good at, and there's one thing that the government is good at, is a complete control of the media and censoring any opposition. And of course, control means control of the media, control of your speech, control of behavior. But what about control of food? And I'm only bringing this up because Jacob, you weren't born in New York City, but you're well aware of New York City and what they do and all that stuff. And New York City is going to begin to track carbon footprints of the residents' food purchases.
Yep.
So whatever you buy, it'll be tracked, and they're going to put a cap on red meat served by public institution. This is by Mayor Eric Adams, who admitted, he's not ready to have this conversation, but he's ready to put in these implementations. And he doesn't want migrants in there. He wants to take the sanctuary city away, that specific title, but he wants to track everyone's food purchases. Now, why would you want to do that? I mean, this is food fascism.
Look,
to track people's food purchases?
concerning Adams, he's a racist. If a white police captain referred to black people in any derogatory manner, he would never get elected mayor of New York City. But this guy's a racist. He referred to white people in a racially derogatory manner, and the media gave him a pass because he's black. He's allowed to be a racist pig, which is what he is. And how he passed up becoming a captain, how he passed up quote unquote crackers. Well, did he pass them up, or was he an affirmative action beneficiary? In other words, was he given unfair promotion? promotional advantages because of race. Well, that's another question. But this is he's a lowlife. The man is a lowlife. He's a racist. He's a lowlife, and it's provable. Just watch what he said. But this has got to be understood in a wider context. You have the main city of the main country in the world at this time in history. New York City is the main city in the main country in the world at this time in history. UN and all that stuff, Wall Street, whatever. It's the main place, okay? It's what Rome was, it's what Babylon was, it's what London was. Other places have been that at different times in history. Now it's New York. So it has a global precedent. It's where the UN is. At the same time, you have a coming food crisis in terms of grain reserve manipulation. China has 69% of the world's corn reserves. China has 60% of the world's rice reserves and 51% of the world's wheat reserves. Now, the USA and Canada can produce this stuff adequately, but China is in a position to cause a world food crisis in terms of grains that will affect other countries, particularly the third world, okay? The only ones going to be immune are the big grain producers. Now, Ukraine is not producing the grain. The steppes, which is the Great Plains of Europe, or the steppes, because of the war in Ukraine, they're not producing it. You've only got two players, North America with the Great Plains, and China has the reserves, okay? Yeah, that is heading for a food crisis that's going to affect the third world, particularly if it blows or when it blows. The other thing is wanting to trace carbon footprints. This is such a lie in itself. What is the lie? China is building 2 coal-fired electric plants a week, 2 coal-fired powerhouses a week. And they want the rest of the world to reduce CO2 production while they're doing it in an out of control manner to give themselves the upper hand economically. And the stupid left are playing into their hands or acting in concert with them. Certainly Biden is. He's on their payroll, obviously. Him and his son. The whole thing, what's it coming to? Well, it's just like artificial intelligence, like digital currency. This is what it's coming to. It's coming to this. And he broke the third seal, and I heard the third living creature come, and I looked, and behold, a black horse. And he who sat on it had a pair of scales in his hand. And I heard, as it were, a voice in the center of the 4 living creatures, a quart of wheat for a denarius. In other words, and 3 quarts of barley for a denarius. Do not harm the oil and wine. Well, without dealing with the oil and wine right now, what it's saying is, it is going to take a day's wages approximately to feed 1 person. It will take a day's wages to feed 1 person with the minimum amount of caloric nutrition, calories in nutrition. We're heading for a food crisis, but it is not one that is simply because of drought. It's one that is man-made. The war in the Ukraine,
Yes.
the hoarding by China,
Yes.
this carbon footprint garbage in the United States and Europe. It's man-made. It is satanically controlled.
That's right. That's right. Ken,
Can
we
I
talked
add
about
one
thing.
thing?
Yeah,
Can
yeah.
I
Go
add
ahead.
one
Go ahead,
thing on
David.
this?
Go ahead, David.
Out there in the country where I live, we have rural television, and they talk a lot about crop reports and things like this. And I saw a report that wheat production is going to be cut back this year because of its undesirable price. So that should be something put into the mix here. So if American farmers are cutting back,
Yeah.
that's going to could easily hurt us that way. So go
Yeah.
buy some wheat, put it in your shop, in your garage.
Yeah.
What is
You
even
can't-
further
yeah, go.
stupid is when they are taking, in some states, 10% of the corn harvest and using it to make ethanol to put into gasoline.
Your tank.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the gasoline. It's just, yeah, take food and destroy it.
Yeah.
Hey Ken, we talked about famine, the FAM war, the famine pandemic war.
Yes.
And that subject comes a lot, especially the last 3 years. What do you make of this? I mean, it just seems like it's, as Jacob was pointed out, it just seems like we're ratcheting it up to the point where there's not going to be a turning back. It's just going to be China hoarding, less production, war, and eventually you're going to have food restrictions.
Yes, the pandemic, famine, war, and they always follow each other. If you go back in history, Michael Yon is someone who I follow on Twitter, and he's a great guy to follow. And on just the immigration as well. But you're looking at with the pandemic, whether it was whatever you believe, fake or not, and with the war, you always have famine that comes in, and you just went back, and it's just history, pan, fam, war, all the way through history. What we're facing is going to be shortages, and even if we can go and still buy stuff at the store, it's going to hit sudden. It's going to be pretty sudden, I think, and it's just smart to have a little bit of, like David said, have a little bit of storage of stuff, and if you can afford, and that's why we have extra storage here at the house if you need. So we have extra for our neighbors. So that's just a way of God providing, if you look at it that way. But it's inevitable. So
yeah, I mean it's in the book of Revelation, talks about this idea of famine and
Yeah.
this idea of war and this idea of that major control. And I want to, before we move on to the war, I forgot to mention this, but I think it's worth watching and listening to what they're doing. Did you guys see the FBI whistleblowers went before the House subcommittee, and they were talking about it, and it blew my mind how these men have the courage to be a whistleblower, find out what's going on with the FBI, tremendous corruption, top to bottom. Of course, the media dismissed it as just people are crazy. But one of the guys said something interesting at the end of his interview, Mr. Garrett O'Boyle. They asked him whether or not other co-workers, if he would encourage them to come forward as whistleblowers, and he says, no, I wouldn't. And he said, well, pray about it first, and then I would not encourage them to do it, because the government will crush you. He says, if you expose what they're doing, the government will crush you. It's probably the most straightforward sentences I ever heard anybody say, especially coming in from the FBI. Jacob, we'll start with you. What's your take on this whistleblowers and just that one statement of Mr. O'Boyle that basically said they'll crush you if you come forward?
This is absolutely true. Again, you're dealing with the Gestapo, with the political police force, operating under the guise of a legitimate law enforcement agency, an investigation agency, and national security agency. But the FBI is none of that. They will crush you. We live under the illusion of democracy. I've been saying that since David Rockefeller's Trilateral Commission. It's not real democracy. It doesn't matter, Democrat, Republican, it's not going to be a genuine democracy. That is only deteriorated. What these people are basically what I've been saying all along. They're not real socialists. They're using a version of socialism in order to bring about a neo-feudalism. And in feudalism, there's only one kind of government that works in feudalism. And that is one that cannot be democratic. A feudalistic economy cannot allow for democracy. It can allow for the illusion of democracy, but it cannot allow for democracy. Democracy means you support the party line. You support the narrative. You support the agenda of the establishment, controlled by the elitists. That's what it means. It doesn't mean what it was defined as intended to mean constitutionally. democracy's gone. It's gone. It's more conspicuously gone in Australia, New Zealand, and Canada than in the USA, but it's going in the USA. And the main thing driving it is the breakdown of morality and the stupidity of the American people, a high percentage of them who have voted for their own death.
Now, when it comes to, let's switch topic real quick to the wars and rumors of wars that Jesus spoke about. And obviously the main war that everybody has their eyes on, it's not the only one, but the main one that people have their focus on is what's going on in Ukraine. And Ukraine with their spring offensive, targeting Russian targets, and of course, Russia retaliating and back and forth and the back and forth. But it's interesting, Rishi Sunak met with Zelensky in London, got him some long-range missiles. He went around all of Europe. Zelensky went around all of Europe asking for more, asking for more, asking for more. It seems that the U.S. may be pivoting away, and perhaps that's why he's a big frantic in terms of trying to get the European nations to come and help him. He met in Italy with the prime minister, with the Pope, and the president. Didn't seem to go too much in terms of what Italy's willing to do for them. But this war keeps escalating. This war keeps escalating, and it's gotten to the point that even people that used to support Zelensky saying he's not going to win. And if he is going to win, he's going to have to upscale the war. He's going to scale the war to such a place that it's going to be a world war. If he has any chance of winning, it's going to have to be an escalation of war to World War III, if you want to call it that way. Jacob, we'll start with you. We'll go down the line. War, rumors of war. This war seems to have no ending. We're past the 12 months now, and now we're into summer, and it just seems like it's going on and on and on. What's your take on Zelensky looking for help, probably in other places other than the U.S.?
First of all, we have to remember Zelensky is corrupt. He's never been anything more, as we've said, than a lesser of two evils. He was involved with the Bidens. How corrupt can you possibly get? He's nothing more than a lesser of two evils. Now, while I have sympathy for the Ukraine and the Ukrainian people, I have no respect or trust for Zelensky, none whatsoever, or his regime. He's involved in bed with the Bidens. That should tell you right away that he's no good. He can't possibly be any good. However, yesterday, Putin fired somewhere between 11 and 30, you can't get accurate reports, cruise missiles indiscriminately, virtually, at Kiev. He's attacking civilian targets, trying to terrorize the civilian population of Ukraine. Perhaps 500,000 Ukrainians have been killed. Yeah. You can't even get accurate figures, perhaps 500,000. They're paying a terrible, terrible price. Now, why is he doing this? Neither the Ukrainian offensive nor the Russian offensive have materialized. They've not amounted to much. There's been some action on the battlefield, but nothing staggering, nothing. Putin isn't getting very far. He's obviously politically embarrassed. It's been going on over a year. He is now beginning to suffer economically. The economic impact on Russia has not been nearly as bad as the swamp media reported, but now it's beginning to bite. And he doesn't care about casualties, obviously, but the Russian people do. It finally caught up to them in Afghanistan, the casualty figures from Afghanistan, and that's beginning to happen now. So he's in a bind, and we've been saying desperate people will do desperate things. We still cannot rule out him exercising some kind of a limited nuclear option. If he begins to lose the Donetsk region, he may very well do that. Or if he loses the Crimea, again, he's a desperate man. He's humiliated. No matter how much of a brave face he tries to put on it, he's in a humiliated state. The world is laughing at him. Why couldn't you take this country over the way you did when you took Crimea? He is not thinking as rationally as he once did, probably. You've got this guy who runs Wagner, the maniac, the mercenary manager, publicly critical of him. openly critical of him and his policies, or of the Russian government. Again, nobody's winning this war.
Yeah,
Nobody is winning this war. Now, the missiles that Britain is giving, they're not ICBMs, they're not intercontinental. You might call them intermediate range missiles. But what would happen if Zelensky says, if Russia doesn't stop shooting these missiles at Kiev, I'm going to shoot them at Moscow and Petersburg? That can be the next step.
Right. Yeah. And it's been said that he says one thing publicly, of course, inside behind closed doors, he's a lot more hawkish. Ken, what's your thoughts on this?
Well, sorry, one more thing. The other question is, why has the corrupt Biden administration refused to give Poland F-16s and F-18s, so the old MiGs that Poland got from the Soviet Union could be given to the Ukraine? You don't even have to give direct fighter craft to the Ukraine. You just let Poland do it and replenish Poland's tactical fighter arsenal with upgraded F-16s. Why not? What's the problem? Why is Biden dragging his heels?
Right.
This is another question.
Yeah, I wonder if they're pivoting away. Ken, what do you think? I mean, the war just seems to be going on and on. It's just like another Afghanistan, but a lot more at stake.
Yes, a lot more at stake. I do believe it's part of Russia, Iran, and Turkey. You're looking at just the overall picture, the 31,000 foot level. Them, we're looking at Ezekiel 38, 39, possibly. And I mean, the main problem of the U.S. is, how do you build up a country like Ukraine, elevate Zelensky to a modern day Winston Churchill? He met in the office. He met in that office where Winston made a whole bunch of his speeches. And, I will fight them on the beaches, I will fight them on the shorelines, but if you can't, because if, you're going to die, it's like they're holding back just a little bit, I mean, Putin's been holding back just a little bit, and he's who knows, the people behind him, though, that's the main thing that I'm concerned about, is the neocons that are behind him. He's been rather moderate. And I'm not a pro-Russia guy or pro, I'm with Jacob, I'm a pro-Jesus guy. And I'm just watching and looking and seeing if something does happen big, then I'll make a decision. But I'm kind of leaning back and looking at things and just kind of assessing still. I just can't believe that, it's gone on this long. I can't.
And it's escalating. There's no one talking peace. No one is talking peace. Perhaps maybe Trump. Yeah. David, what do you think?
You asked me?
Yeah, David. Yeah. What do you think?
Okay. Well, I do believe, along the lines of Ken, that China, Iran are helping Russia. So all they have to do is outlast the West, let it deplete its missiles, everything like this, and we're pretty much defenseless, and he can take it. But and also, I think that if Zelensky got longer range missiles, I think these current missiles are only 155 miles.
Yeah, 155 miles.
Doesn't mean that they can't smuggle them in and go against Moscow or something like that, which if that happened, short range limited nuclear bomb to take Kyiv out, that would just be the end place. And Russia could easily win this, and there's nothing, the corruption of Ukraine, I just don't know what how they can win, because we're not going to give them the missiles and the planes for them to win the war. It's just a stalemate. It's what there was an old general, he won two medals of honor, and he said war is profitable for old men, and the profits are paid for in young men's blood.
Can I say something, Marco?
Absolutely.
So the Ukrainian people are being slaughtered right now, and that's the bottom line. And they're being wiped out as a nation. They're literally watching the death of a nation, and that's what's sad. That's what's sad.
tens of thousands. It could be incalculable exactly how
Yeah.
many people they have lost. Jacob, this is one tabloid, which is the UK tabloid called The Sun. So I don't know how much to make of this, but their headline was,
Free joke.
yeah, chilling photo, Russian 18 nuke bombers, 18 Russian nuke bombers at the NATO border. Putin threatens UK over Ukraine missiles. Is that a real headline? Is that a real thing?
The Sun is not a credible source of anything. I'd need anything that appears in the Sun to be corroborated by other more reliable sources.
Yeah, I understand.
I mean, it's a ridiculous joke.
Yeah, I don't put it past that Putin threatens.
Oh, I don't either.
Yeah,
He's
yeah.
already, but it's not new. 3 weeks ago, he began deploying short to intermediate range missiles along the Finnish border.
Right. I'm
So
just
what
concerned.
Sun will do is take something like that
Yeah,
and sensationalize it to make it seem like a current headline story. You can't go by the Sun. It's not.
yeah. I understand the Sun. I just think that the some of, despite of how maybe hyperbolic it may seem, I think we're very close to a situation where other nations can be dragged in, and that's the concern. Just like World War I.
Absolutely.
It's World War.
Yeah,
World War.
a regional war escalates to this major war. But let's as we're coming down to the end, we're thank you so much for watching and thank you for being with us. We're on different platforms, but specifically, we'd like for you to join us on Rumble, which keeps ever growing. And thank you for being on Rumble, because I think of one of all the platforms that are out there, it's one that it's supporting what a lot of people are saying, and free speech, and giving the Christians the opportunity to speak. So thank God for that. But we also have our own major websites, Memorial.tv, memorialtv.org. Catch us there and watch us there. And we're going to be heading out of YouTube and out of Facebook and heading over to, well, we're still on those platforms for Backstage. So we won't be on YouTube and Facebook as soon as we're done with a couple of more topics. So catch us on Rumble, memorialtv.org, memorial.tv to see Backstage. We got an interesting, very interesting topics regarding, well, you're going to have to see. Let me put it that way. And so Jacob's going to give us some insight on that, but we also have Ken here with us from Ken's Corner, and of course, David Lister. And let's finish off with this, because I think it's a very important thing. Jacob, I did not know this, so total credit to you. Tim Keller passed away today from pancreatic cancer. He had a long battle with it. What's your take on his influence in the church? Good, bad, indifferent? And what do you make of his legacy?
As the founder of the Gospel Coalition, he's a negative figure. Tim Keller, professed evangelical, considered to be a major evangelical, sort of creedal apologist, trying to follow in the line of C.S. Lewis. In other words, C.S. Lewis was a creedal apologist. He would defend things that all people calling themselves Christian could broadly agree on, but he wouldn't get deep into theology. He would just speak about things all Christians could agree on. This is a creedal apologist, okay? That he followed that line as something of an intellectual. But although he was packaged and presented as an intellectual, when you read his books and listen to his interviews, he's more like a confused, bumbling man. He was not someone who was what many people ignorantly took him to be. Now, I make no judgments about his personal faith. I don't know. I'm not his judge. I only judge his doctrine and his teaching. But let's just go through just some of it. One, an ardent proponent of theistic evolution. Now, death came with the fall. How did death precede Adam and Eve? He said, I don't know, but the big bugs must have ate the little bugs. He was a proponent of theistic evolution. That was one of the first things. The second thing is he was a proponent of Roman Catholic mysticism. Ignatius Loyola, the murderous founder of the Jesuit cult, with his exercises. Teresa of Avila, Francis de Sales, John of the Cross. He followed Roman Catholic mysticism as a source of Christian spirituality. Now, how an evangelical could do that, I don't know, but he did. Then in his book, The Reasons for God, he was strongly ecumenical. He was influenced by Flannery O'Connor, who again was a committed Roman Catholic. Most disturbingly, perhaps, was his letting the gospel of salvation being overshadowed by a social gospel. He wrote directly, Jesus suffered not for us, but with us. He was identifying with the oppressed, but not the oppressors. That's what he said. Now, he did not deny that there was a pardon for sin because of the death of Jesus, but where do you get in the gospel that Jesus suffered with us? He was identifying with the oppressed. That is not a New Testament or a biblical emphasis on what Jesus was doing on the cross. He was making atonement for our sins. It was penal substitution. He got into this social gospel thing. I'm not saying he denied Jesus purchased our pardon on the cross, but it was not his emphasis. What he got into was saying the following. He would say things like, well, evangelicals, when they speak about things like homosexuals, instead of having compassion and being sensitive and being understanding as Christ was, they become judgmental and harsh. That is what he wrote. He was critical of evangelicals who were outspoken in their opposition to homosexuality. He said that they were, instead of being compassionate and instead of being sympathetic, he actually used the word sympathetic and sensitive and having understanding as Jesus did. Well, let's see. That's what he said. What does God say? God says something different. For this reason, God gave them over to degrading passions, for their women exchanged the natural function for that which is unnatural. In the same way also, the men abandoned the natural function of the women and burdened their desire towards one another, men with men, committing indecent acts and receiving in their own persons the due penalty of their error. Now that's what it says. Being filled with unrighteousness, wickedness, greed, evil. That is what the scriptures say about those issues. He says, no, we have to be like Jesus and be sympathetic and understanding and sensitive. Where is the Bible sympathetic about living a life of sin? Jesus loved sinners, but he hated sin. And he warned people to repent of sin because he loved them. Tim Keller compromised biblical standards of righteousness in his understanding of the gospel. He eclipsed substitutionary atonement, penal substitution, with this idea of Jesus suffered with us to identify with the oppressed. The guy spoke a lot of rubbish. He was into Roman Catholic mysticism. He was into ecumenism. I do not respect anything the man has ever written. Not one of his books. I've never seen one of his books that don't belong in a fire, in a furnace. Now, do I celebrate his death? No, I do not celebrate his death, but neither do I mourn it. I make no judgments about his personal faith. That's something that God does. I make no judgments about his personal faith, but about his theology, it was confused, it was false, it was convoluted, and I do not think his death will be a loss for the body of Christ. I think it'll be a gain for the body of Christ because we're minus one less false teacher. I hope he did know Jesus.
Yeah. But Jacob, do you consider him a false teacher?
Yes.
Okay. David Lister, you've been a pastor, youth pastor, teaching. Were you ever influenced in any sort of way by Tim Keller? Because many pastors were. I mean, in fact, he's one of the major influences in pastoral theology today.
No, I had warned about him. And in
Good.
fact, I've named him tomorrow in my sermon as one of
Okay.
those,
All right.
so yeah, along with a few others. So
Yeah.
and just we're seeing more and more of this, the compromising that's going on among actually people that are good are starting to, that were once good are now going off. The apostasy is accelerating. People better make sure their doctrine is good, examining themselves for these last days. Night is coming. And
Yeah.
it's going to
No
be
one's
tougher because persecution is coming, as we well know. And will people be ready for it?
Yeah, this is interesting because Keller was very ambiguous on abortion. I think we had a whole section on Keller here about a year ago. I can't remember what day it was, so we can pull it up. But on abortion, and some of his messages were like, well, you just have to go with the government, and if the law says that, then be a good citizen and go with the law. It completely excluding the fact that it was murder. Now, he did agree it was murder, but he would side more with being obedient to the government, which was, to Jacob's point, very confusing. You could not follow what he was trying to say. But one thing he never spoke about, and this is the one of those, look at people what they say, but look what they don't say. He never really lamented much on the persecution of Christians throughout the world. He was more concerned with, like Jacob's talking about, the oppressed, but I'm like, well, what about the Christians who are oppressed by Islam and other countries like that? But persecution it's as David talked about, it's here, it's coming, it's both. We'll start with Jacob real quick, and then we'll go down the line. Persecution is here, Jacob, in a lot of Western countries. What's your take?
I was disturbed to see an arrest that took place in Australia. I'm told it may have been some time ago, but not a very long time ago, of a pregnant woman, a pregnant mother with a little baby, another baby coming, and her husband. And she posted something on the internet supporting protests of COVID. They were a family who did not want to get vaccinated. And these corrupt Australian, I can only describe them as corrupt. They were thugs. They were just thugs with badges. They may as well have been wearing SWAT stickers. Pushed their way into the house and told this woman she was under arrest for putting her opinion on the internet and telling people to support a protest. And her husband's there holding the baby. She's out to here, and this thug, this filthy thug with a badge. Now, remember, I come from a family of policemen. I don't hate cops. But this filthy thug with a badge cuffs her and roughs her up. Well, then I watch another clip of the Federal Bureau of Intimidation coming with flak jackets, armored vests, helmets, and automatic weapons, like a SWAT team. FBI agents coming to the house of born-again Christians for the crime of protesting outside or near an abortion clinic. And you come at them like a SWAT team with automatic weapons. Again, filthy thugs with badges that these decent FBI agents this week were trying to expose the corruption of the FBI
That's
for
right.
what it is. It is the filthy Bureau of Intimidation. It is not a legitimate criminal investigation organization or national security organization. If so, they would have arrested Hunter Biden. If so, they would have arrested Hunter Biden and investigated the Biden administration for its ties to China and these payoffs. They're not about that. They're a political police force. They're just filthy thugs with badges. Then in Canada, this week, a young guy arrested for giving out Bibles. They arrest him, they take him away in a police wagon. Then they release him later, but warn him not to give out any more Bibles. Again, filthy thugs with badges. Now, coming from a family of policemen, I have tended to be pro-police. We no longer have a legitimate FBI. The Mounties in Canada are no longer the Mounties of the Northwest Canadian Mounted Police, Royal Mounted Police. They're not that anymore. The Australian police, they're not what the Australian police once were. All they are is people who may as well be wearing SWAT stickers. They're a political police force, and they're coming after Christians.
And you have a lot of friends and contacts in military and stuff like that, and police force and all that. I mean, you've trained some of them and all that. What's your take on what Jacob is saying? I mean, it just seems like the intimidation is there, especially against Christians.
He's exactly right. And there's a I don't know if it's a pay type of thing or if they just don't want to get fired or whatever, but there's a couple that have been outspoken that have said, I'm done with this, but there's a 95% that stay in, and they are the Gestapo, and they are the new oppressors, and that's what's happening. If you want to get paid, you get, you stay in, and that's what's sad. And I see it, and I haven't trained since moving to Arizona. I haven't trained a whole bunch, but out back in California, 20 years I trained them, and I saw it change as we went through the years. I saw it change. Yeah, I saw I saw the mindset change, and then I saw a couple guys got out. They were done, and then the ones that stayed in, they changed their mindsets. It was crazy. It was crazy. Yeah.
That's, I mean, to me, I mean, it's talking about Keller and not talking about persecution or ignoring it completely. I did want to finish off before we move into backstage with this idea of persecution being here and coming. So it's a both aspect of it. And so many, or so very little Christians, I should say, so very little Christians prepared for it. They're not prepared because their pastors or teachers or leaders are not telling them. And I want to bring this back to pre-tribulation view of the rapture, in terms of we won't be here to see these things. Now, the goalpost keeps moving because things that they said 10, 12 years ago have happened that they said we won't be here to see them. Now, we'll start with you, Jacob, and then we'll go to David. Keep moving the goalposts. At what point do we say it's here, but you keep denying it? And the people are going to become not only incredibly disappointed and disillusioned of what they've been teaching, hasn't come to pass, but also the danger is ill-prepared and not spiritually ill-prepared to deal with things that the rest of Christians around the world have dealt with. And church history had told us that Christians go through persecution. Jacob, we'll start there. I could go on and on talking about some different examples, but for the sake of time, we'll go to you and then we'll go to David.
Okay. Mohammed died and went to hell. And he said, "Oh no, I was wrong. I'm burning." Oh! And Adolf Hitler died and went to hell. And he said, "Oh no, I was wrong. I'm burning." Ah! And Joseph Stalin died and went to hell. And he said, "Oh no, I was wrong. I'm burning." Ah! And then a word faith money preacher died and went to hell. And he said, "My body's lying to me." The same thing is true of the pre-trib people. They cannot come to terms with reality. They will simply ignore reality to the point where they can't ignore it anymore. They'll continue to believe nonsense and continue to move the goalpost. They've already moved the goalpost concerning the apostasy being the rapture, which is complete nonsense, and which some of the people who've given assent to this, who know better, should be ashamed of themselves. I hope they get out of the ministry because they've turned from good teachers to bad ones.
Wow.
They just cannot, anybody who subscribes to that, any pastor or preacher who subscribes to that has no right to be in the ministry because they're working for the devil. consciously or I'm not saying deliberately, but they're doing his work. They're doing the work of the devil. Pre-trib preachers are doing the work of the devil.
It was interesting, Jacob. You mentioned the apostasy as the rapture, and then just the deliberate changing of the word.
Of course.
Jay made this video. It was a fantastic video if you want to watch it, about Andy Woods and the confusing theology of Andy Woods. And Jay, you and I were, you were surprised about how deep he went into the substitution of that word apostasia for aphistemi. A little bit about the video, not to prolong the episode, but Jay, great job. It was a great job, great video, exposed a lot of things. But coming out of it and having to deal with it, what was your take after it was done?
I mean, reviewing all the footage that I did of Andy Wood, I mean, that's just the tip of the iceberg, changing the apostasy to being the rapture. That's a big issue. But then he gets into the fact that Christians that are morally asleep, that fall back in love with the world like Demas, their salvation is secure. That's a mind blower. That's a mind blower. That you don't need repentance. You don't need to live a crucified life. You got the stamp. You're stamped in. Doesn't matter if you leave the club. You got the stamp on your hand. You can get it right back in. No problem. That was crazy. And the fact that people laud him, and also just to share this, I read all the comments that we get, and the amount of people that were just complaining about how bad, supposedly, and mean we were to Andy Woods. I was astonished that we got that many comments that were like, just, hey, why are you so mean to him? This is totally out of context. Of course he looks bad. You added those creepy violins to to the cuts, and I'm like, they were there for a purpose.
Oh, goodness, David Lister, we'll go to you.
All right.
The rapture keeps moving the goalposts. Pre-trib rapture keeps moving the goalposts, and well, I mean, would it ever come to an admission that, hey, we used to be, this is what my friend used to say. They told us we'd be out of here by now, and it didn't happen. So we had to look into the scriptures a little more, and we figured out, hey, I'm not going to be pre-trib anymore. But what's your take on this?
Well, it's somewhat shocking to me. I think it was last week or 2 weeks ago when we saw the report. I think it was by Barna on 66% of evangelical Christians don't believe that Jesus lived a sinless life. Now, correct me if that number's not right, but if that's true, you see the compromise within the church. We're supposed to be the non-compromising place where people could come for the truth. And if people in the Christian church and evangelicals specifically are compromising, why wouldn't the world compromise with police officers knowing what they're doing is wrong, and yet they go ahead and do it? They arrest the innocent instead of protecting the innocent. This is kind of shocking, but it's the world that we live in. And if the church keeps compromising, the world is only going to get worse, because we're supposed to be the people that hold back darkness. And then police are supposed to be God's anointed servants, and army people, soldiers are supposed to be his anointed people holding back evil. And we're seeing just the opposite. Everybody is compromising, and that's not good for the end of days, because who will they come and get? They're going to get Christians that tell the truth. And if you want to hold on to the truth, it comes with a cost.
That's right. And it'll be people like Tim Keller who will side with the persecutors against the persecuted. That's why I don't see his death as a loss, but a gain.
Ken, you and I have a similar history. We came out of pre-tribulationism. We had that view at one point in our Christian, but you deal with a lot of not only pastors but believers and people that you met along the road that hold to that view, and you had some really interesting takes over the years on this. Share just some of the stuff that how you see it, how you see how it is evolved, and some of the potential dangers that you have when you have this mind.
Well, I'm looking at Matthew 24, 9 through 13, especially verse 10, where it says, "Many will fall away." Yep. And I just, it's one of the most solemn, sober, heavy, weighty warnings in the entire Bible. It's just, it's just straight up. And all nations will hate you because of my name. I think a lot of these people want to be accepted, like Tim Keller. He wanted to be accepted by non-Christians and Christians. And the ones that stand up, that's the insanity to where this stuff logically leads is crazy, and we have to resolve in our hearts, Lord, even if I am the last one standing, I will stand with you. I will bear the stigma, even if my own brothers and sisters betray me. We have to make a stand. It's crazy. I think a lot of people are gonna, when it starts setting in, because they push, like Jacob said and David said, when they just keep pushing and pushing the goalpost. It's like, oh, it's not supposed to be here. I don't understand, Amir or their radicalness for it. So I don't understand it.
Yeah, it's become about as a statement of faith. It's become about this doctrinally core as the resurrection and as the gospel itself. Well,
great prayer, Ken. Thank you.
Amen. Amen.
It was a good prayer.
You just want to let everybody know we're going to be jumping over to backstage just about now. And we want to thank you for watching, catching up with Jacob. And we're going to jump over to backstage. We got some questions. We got some really good questions coming in. So we're going to take those questions on backstage. So jump out of YouTube and Facebook. Stay on Rumble if you're already there, or get there. And if you want to ask questions, that's where you do ask on Rumble, MorialTV.org. And you can meet us there in just a couple of seconds. Yeah, David, go ahead.
Did you tell people where to find the conference tomorrow?
Where to find the conference tomorrow?
Where's it being broadcast? Is it being broadcast live?
Yeah, it'll be on YouTube. It'll be on YouTube on CCOD TV. So not CCOD. What is that? Devore Truth. There we go. Devore Truth. And I think there's going to be an email sent out. I hope Sandy sent it out.
Yeah, it did go out. I was just wanting to plug today.
Oh, well, thank you so much. We do appreciate it. If you want to hear David and Jacob, do tune into CCOD and our Devore Truth channel, and you'll find him there. And Jay's going to be with us tomorrow too. So the only one that we're missing is Davey and Ken. So I don't know if we can teleport them. I don't know if we have that technology yet, but I think soon we will be able to have that. So just kidding. God bless you guys.
Marco,
we'll see
real
backstage.
Quick.
Yeah, go ahead.
Since we have almost 500 people watching between Rumble and YouTube, one simple thing you can do to really help the ministry out, get the message out. If you're watching us right now, please hit the like button. We have 1 like on Rumble, and we have a couple likes on YouTube. The message does not get out unless the algorithm sees that people like the stuff. So we really ask that you take the time, if you're watching, to hit that button for us.
I would also like to add, if you watch us on YouTube, please watch us on Moriel.tv, MorielTV.org. Watch us on Rumble, or watch us on RTN, or most easily just Moriel.tv or MorielTV.org. YouTube is not our friend, and it's not your friend. We're on alternative platforms, and we're going to one now. Thank you, James.
All right. God bless you guys. Well, that's just the way the algorithm works. The more people like it, the more it recommends it to you and other people and shares it out. So we thank you for watching. We thank you for staying with us. And let's go meet on backstage. We'll see you guys in a second.
Yes, sir. No, I think I muted both.